Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira says to Aaron Bronstetter he's not going to be ready at UFC 294. That was all the rumor. Announced Abu Dhabi main event Islam Makhachev versus to be decided. And we saw Charles Oliveira go out and starch Beneil Dariush on the UFC 289 pay-per-view. We're like, oh, for sure, they're giving Charles Oliveira the title fight. Obviously, the winner of Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje's not going to be ready in time. And yeah, there was Alexander Volkanovski to possibly get that title fight, but most of us in the back of our minds were like, oh yeah, we're definitely getting a Charles Oliveira Islam Makhachev main event for Abu Dhabi. Oliveira says he's not ready. He says he will be ready by November or December even. UFC 295 or UFC 296. But I'm going to be honest, the UFC already planned on Islam being at UFC 294. Volkanovski is fighting this weekend. I think he's going to smash Yair Rodriguez in the main event, ground and pound TKO him in one of those middle rounds. And I think Volkanovski is going to get right onto that mic. We had the really I don't know how he talks. I don't have a good Australian accent, but he's going to talk about we had a really close fight with Islam Makhachev. A lot of people thought I won. A lot of people thought Islam won. Let's run it back in your home country this time. Last time we did it in my home country of Australia. I'm going to go to your backyard and take your belt from you and bring it back to Australia. That's kind of how I envision the call out going from Alexander Volkanovski. And it just makes sense. If Oliveira can't do it, the next guy is literally Volkanovski because the man had a split decision with you. Oliveira got finished by you. This makes sense. Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev, maybe February, maybe March. Something like that if Islam can beat Alexander Volkanovski again. But this literally means Volkanovski, Islam Makhachev, UFC 294. Probably like an 80% chance that that's what's going to happen. Or they just scrap it all together and do Islam versus Oliveira in November or December and have Leon versus Colby at UFC 294. But neither of them are from that area of the world. I don't really think that would make much sense, to be quite honest with you. So I think they keep Islam on there and have him versus Alexander Volkanovski. And my early prediction for that fight, I am going to go Islam Makhachev by a decision. This time a little bit more dominant than the first time because he knows what Alexander has been training. He knows his wrestling and grappling has been getting better and better and better. I think Islam's going to make his improvements. I think Volkanovski's done the best he can do against Islam Makhachev in that last fight. And we got to think, UFC 294 from UFC 290 is not that big of a gap for Volkanovski to bulk up properly to be a legitimate UFC lightweight. I mean, we have to think about that as another legitimate factor here. July 8th is UFC 290. UFC 293 in Sydney, Australia is on September 9th. That was another rumor from maybe Volkanovski being on there. But now we're saying most likely UFC 294, Abu Dhabi, October 22nd. That's July. August, September, October. That is literally 3 months and a half, maybe 3 months and a week for Volkanovski to bulk up. I don't think it'll be enough time for him. I think he loses yet again. I don't think he gets finished. But I do have Islam Makhachev by another decision. What do y'all think about this in the lightweight division? Last thing, I was about to just end the video and start editing it and all that type of stuff. From Ali Abdelaziz reacting to that news that I just told you, Ali Abdelaziz, Islam Makhachev's manager, says Islam will fight in Abu Dhabi, no matter what. No matter what. He's not going to wait for November or December. He is going to fight in Abu Dhabi. There's not going to be an Oliveira rematch as for right now. And we are going to get Islam Volkanovski or Islam versus the winner of Poirier and Gaethje. But we already know Poirier and Gaethje, they have like no time to really prepare, especially after what I assume to be an absolute war in the UFC's lightweight division. What do y'all think? Thoughts down below. Michael Chandler on Twitter says wheels are in motion. That literally means, I mean, word for word, bar for bar, we know what this means, is that the fight with him and Conor McGregor is starting to get made. I know there was a lot of those rumors going around that Conor McGregor needed to get back into USADA at a certain point in time if he wanted to fight by the end of 2023, but we know Dana can find a loophole. It's not, the USADA is not a government organization forcing the UFC to do it. The UFC hired USADA to do stuff for them and test all of their athletes. But if they got an athlete like Conor McGregor, they don't have to use USADA on every fighter. They're just using them when they want to and when they need to. They don't need to, nor do they want to, for Conor McGregor here, which means, like Michael Chandler is saying, the wheels are in motion. This literally means that him and Conor McGregor are gonna be fighting at UFC 296. This means the UFC is working on it. They're getting some sort of loophole to get Conor McGregor back by the end of the year. We just saw an announcement with Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic as the main events for UFC 295. We're hearing stuff about maybe, possibly a Colby Covington, Leon Edwards at UFC 294 or UFC 295. We're hearing Islam versus Volkanovski, Islam versus Oliveira on one of those cards as well. But none of those rumors are about UFC 296, which is literally all for Conor McGregor. And they're working on the loopholes now. It's not official. I'm not out here saying I know stuff that you guys don't. I'm just making an inference here, and I'm saying it's a 90% possible that right now the UFC's found a loophole, gotten Conor McGregor back in and able to fight against Michael Chandler on December in the T-Mobile Arena for UFC 296 pay-per-view. I do have Michael Chandler going out there and winning that fight by TKO. Just because Conor McGregor does not seem into the fight game right now, he doesn't seem to be training as much as he should be. I do have Michael Chandler winning, but who do y'all think wins? Michael Chandler or Conor McGregor? Jack Della Maddalena is still trying to get the UFC to have him compete on next week's UFC Fight Night. He had 2 cancellations this week. Sean Brady had a crazy thing happen with his, I believe his elbow, and there was like some sort of weird tumor thing happening with it, or some infection, like it is saying right here. And Sean Brady, the 15-1, previously undefeated guy with only 1 loss to number 3 Belal Muhammad. It was a really weird injury for Sean Brady. Then he had a short notice opponent come in and have a medical issue and had to get his brain checked out on short notice. I mean, some crazy events happening here, and unfortunate for Sean Brady and Josiah Harrell, but obviously it's also unfortunate for Jack Della Maddalena, who still has not fought since February of 2023, and before that fought in November. He's been very active inside of the UFC, fighting 3 times in 2022. He was trying to fight 3 to 4 times into 2023 as well, but he just keeps on getting these cancellations after cancellations, and now he's talking about trying to fight at UFC Fight Night home versus Bueno Silva. There's a lot of lightweights on this card. Like, I'm talking a lot of lightweights. 1, 2, 3, 4 lightweight fights for this UFC Fight Night. But as of right now, it's Saturday, UFC 290, and we have honestly a good amount of time for the UFC to set up another fight for next week, because as of now, there is literally no way he's going to be fighting this week and today at UFC 290. So I've been thinking about potential opponents that would be willing to step in on short notice. Daniel Rodriguez, probably not. He's coming off a TKO loss in his last fights. You go lower down the list, you got Max Griffin, who just fought recently, but he did take a lot of damage in that one, so I don't think that would be a very likely scenario. And then we get to Alex Morono. Alex Morono, who I do see as being a very viable option to potentially come in there on short notice and face Jack Della Maddalena is coming off a win on Tim Means. He beat Semelsberger, David Zawada, Donald Cerrone, so many solid guys, and only lost a fluke knockout to Santiago Ponzinibbio, who, if you remember, let's go on to UFC 282 really quick. Who was Santiago supposed to fight? Robbie Lawler on the card, and my guy Alex Morono came in on very, very short notice to save that main card just a little bit. So if Alex Morono is able to do that and step in on Santiago, I'm sure he'd be willing to do the same here. Bryan Battle is another guy who we just saw on the Gabe Green one. Who is Gabe Green supposed to fight on this fight card? It was Jake Matthews on the UFC on ABC 4 fight card. That one got canceled due to a Matthews injury, and Bryan Battle came in on short notice and got a 14-second knockout. So those are two guys I really think. Joaquin Buckley's kind of out of the table. The man is very, very fat. At this moment in time, I highly doubt he's going to be able to. But these two guys in Bryan Battle, as well as Alex Morono, guys kind of right outside of the top 15. Both guys with only one loss in their last 5 fights, and that are pretty close to being deserving of a top 15 fight in the UFC welterweight division. Both guys would make for entertaining matchups with Jack Della Maddalena. Alex Morono, Jack Della Maddalena would be a solid striking match, and Bryan Battle, Jack Della Maddalena also would be a solid striking match. I do think Jack Della gets the TKO in the Alex Morono fight and gets a 30-27 decision in a Bryan Battle fight, but either way, they are both very, very fun fights to be made. I didn't really look at the quote or the tweet or the message from Jack Della, but he said, "Very glad this fight with Josiah did not go forward. I hope his medical issues are cleared up. I came to Vegas to fight, so I'm pushing for a fight next week. I want to perform for my people." So I do believe he's going to get a fight next week. I'm really hoping it's not some random debuting fighter. I mean, Alex Morono as well as Bryan Battle have a lot of time to prepare for this Jack Della Maddalena fight. About a week and a half that they've known Jack has needed an opponent. So I think they should jump on that opportunity to get a top 15 fight. What do y'all think? Who will Jack Della Maddalena fight next in the welterweight division? Khabib Nurmagomedov and George St. Pierre in a grappling match? I mean, George St. Pierre is 42 years old. As of right now, he's still on a crazy UFC win streak, beating Josh Koscheck, Matt Hughes, Matt Serra, John Fitch, BJ Penn, Thiago Alves, Dan Hardy, Josh Koscheck again, Jake Shields, Carlos Condit, Nick Diaz, Johnny Hendrickson, sort of a robbery, and then Michael Bisping up a weight class for the belt. That is what, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9... 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, or 15 wins in a row. About half of the win streak of Khabib Nurmagomedov, who's recently beating Gaethje, Poirier, McGregor, Lala Quinta, Edson Barboza, and so many more. If you don't know, now you will know. Dana White did announce that George St. Pierre is going to compete in a grappling jiu-jitsu match at the end of the year on the on the UFC Fight Pass for a jiu-jitsu match. The opponent was not made official. There were names that George St. Pierre did once, like Anderson Silva, like maybe a Khabib Nurmagomedov, and I believe Kamaru Usman was also in the talks as a former welterweight champ versus another welterweight champ, two of the pretty much greatest welterweights of all time. But I personally would like a Khabib Nurmagomedov, George St. Pierre jiu-jitsu match a lot more, because George is probably around the same size as Khabib Nurmagomedov now, because if you've seen videos of Khabib, the man has been eating quite a bit since his retirement after the Justin Gaethje fights. Dana White did say George St. Pierre, Khabib Nurmagomedov is not in the works. But he didn't say that it was not going to be in the works, as he would love to pull that fight off, and I would love it as well. We have the greatest welterweight of all time in George St. Pierre and the greatest lightweight of all time in Khabib Nurmagomedov. George went up to the middleweight division, and Khabib arguably could have went up to the UFC welterweight division and probably had a large amount of success in that weight class. I would have to go Khabib Nurmagomedov to win in a jiu-jitsu match, but it just sounds fun. It sounds fun. The main event of the Ultimate or the UFC Fight Pass Invitational for grappling, you put the undercard, a lot of other up-and-coming grapplers and stuff, just to really build the names of all the other fighters with a solid main event, and just build the name and the brand around jiu-jitsu as a whole with a huge mega fight like this with Khabib Nurmagomedov and George Rush St. Pierre. And it's not like either guy has to really cut weight or anything or go for a crazy training camp like they would for an MMA fight. It's not as serious as a UFC fight would be. It's not going to ruin Khabib's legacy or ruin GSP's legacy, but it would be great to see. What do y'all think? Khabib versus George St. Pierre in Jiu-Jitsu? Who would win? Put your thoughts down below. Thiago Moises, a former top 15 UFC lightweight contender who fought the likes of Islam Makhachev in the UFC's lightweight division, did not win that fight, but he stepped up on short notice to do a 5-round main event with him. And how long did this man last with Islam? 4 rounds. 4 rounds. Oliveira lasted 2. Bobby Green lasted 1. Dan Hooker lasted 1. Drew Dober lasted 3 rounds. And yeah, we got Arman Saryukian and Davey Ramos lasting unanimous decisions. But that was only 3 rounds. So technically, Thiago lasted longer than even all of those guys. Right now, he's right outside of the top 15 on a 2-fight win streak, both with rear nakeds on Cristiano Chagos in round 1 and Melquizael Costa in round number 2. He's beaten guys like Michael Johnson with an ankle lock, beat Alexander Hernandez, as well as Bobby Green, only losing to solid guys like Damir Ismagulov and Beneil Dariush. I don't necessarily think he's deserving of a top 15 fight next. He's saying that a lot of people are ducking him. That's what he was saying in his Instagram. Looks like everyone is hiding. Hashtag UFC for August 12th. That's in about 1 month from now. But I don't know. I'm trying to figure out an opponent that would make sense for Thiago Moises. And I want to look at that August 12th card because it is coming up very soon. UFC Fight Night, Luque versus Dos Anjos. Most likely he wants to be on the main card of this UFC Fight Night, possibly even be the co-main events. I still don't think he deserves a top 15 guy. I already lost to Damir Ismagulov and lost to Islam Makhachev as well. He deserves someone right outside of the top 15, and if he wins that one, then, you know, I might give him a guy inside of the top 15. But if we look at the UFC rankings on Tapology and try to figure out an opponent, Drew Dober probably doesn't make sense. Obviously, we're not doing a rematch with Joel Alvarez. We have Drakkar Klose, which could make some sense, but I really don't know with him. He's so on and off. And he's been having a lot of cancellations recently with Diego Ferreira and Mark Madsen. And he had an ACL injury, so I highly doubt that is going to be a likely return fight for him. I would say a fight with Benoit Saint-Denis in him, but Benoit wants to be on the France card, and I do believe him versus Diego Ferreira would make a lot of sense. Nasrat Haqparast is a guy that's always willing to come in and fight a lot of these guys. He's always willing to give a good test to a lot of these fighters in the UFC lightweight division, but scroll down just a little bit more, and we got Elves Brenner. 25 years old, deserving of a big step up, as he's 2-0 in the lightweight division in the UFC, beating Zubair Tukhugov and knocking out Guram Kutateladze, who, if you guys remember, Guram was supposed to fight Thiago Moises, but Guram had an injury at UFC 283, so he didn't end up being able to see that fight. But he just beat Guram Kutateladze, so why not do a Brazil versus Brazil card with The main event also being Brazil versus Brazil. We got Brazilian Jacqueline Amorim, Yasmin Lucindo, Poliana Viana, all are on this card, as well as Luana Santos. Let's just make this kind of a low-key UFC Fight Night Brazil card, and we can put on a very, very legit match between Elves Brenner and my guy Thiago Moises. We saw moments where Elves Brenner was getting taken down by Guram Kutateladze, but wasn't 100% getting controlled. It's a good test to see where Thiago Moises is. If he wins that one, man, put him right back inside of the top 15. And if Elves Brenner wins, that gets him 2 good wins over top 15 caliber guys, and you get him a shot inside of the top 15. I think that makes all the sense in the world. Elves Brenner versus Thiago Moises, 2 Brazilians on the co-main event of this UFC Fight Night. I think either a Thiago Moises submission earlier on in the fight or a late TKO from Elves Brenner would be a banger in the lightweight division. But I would go Elves Brenner to win that fight as my official prediction. Booger Beard right here is saying Chase Hooper. So that could also be one. Where is Chase Hooper at on these UFC rankings? He's always willing to take those random steps up. So let's check out Chase Hooper really quick. 12-3-1. He's coming off a win on Nick Fiore in his last fight. Did lose to Steven Peterson before that. He's 123rd. That'd be too big of a step up in my opinion. I wouldn't do that. I think an Elves Brenner fight would make sense for both guys.